Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are covering forms, HTML forms. Yes, these are the things that we usually interact with. There are input fields, radio buttons, and checkboxes, and content area to actually type in. So we've got a lot to cover today. It's about 4:37 on a Sunday, and I want to get over to the beach. So let's get this thing going. Did you like the effect there? What? Okay, all right. HTML forms with no CSS, so it will look pretty bare, pretty plain, nothing style, no style with it at all. And without further ado, let's get to it. All right. Let's see, looking down here, grab the mouse. Okay. Now, let's make sure that we have Visual Studio Code open to the left. And what we can do is create the actual file itself. We're going to call it, let's call it forms. I think that's easy enough, but we don't want that in the actual images directory. Let's just put it right here. And here we go. And before I do continue again, I just want to give a wonderful shout out to the executive assistant Noah for helping out. And let's call this forms.html. All right, now that we have that, who remembers what we need to do within Visual Studio Code to come up with a boilerplate HTML skeleton? I believe it is the exclamation mark or point. There is a huge debate on whether or not we're using exclamation mark or point. Let me know which one you like to use in the actual comments itself. Do you use exclamation point or exclamation mark? Let's hit enter. There we go. We have a bare bones skeleton here. Title of it is going to actually be forms. And again, forms are what we actually interact with. So we're going to learn a few different, as you can see me trying to get the actual title back up here. And there we go. So we're going to have a few new elements that we actually learned today. And again, for everyone that's been with me so far, remember, this is HTML. HTML looks extremely ugly until you add the actual CSS. We will be adding the CSS actual series, which will actually, it should be within the next couple of days actually, where we can get some boilerplate CSS on there so you can actually see, one, how we add it to the actual HTML file, and two, what type of effect it actually has on the actual web page itself. But today we are working with forms, so let's go on ahead and open this up with Live Server. Right-clicking on the file and, of course, clicking on the right server. And now I can actually close that, and let's see what we can put into action over here. Let's go with the first thing. Close this out. Let's add form, enter. So the action itself, so we have the form element. Going to hit enter just to get a little extra space there. The action itself is what you actually want going on with the actual form itself. So what happens when the form is actually submitted? Is it going to be processed with some back-end coding? Whether it's PHP, is anything going to be sent to an actual database? Is anything going to be actually posted or actually retrieved from the database? Or is anything going to be posted to the database? Or is there just nothing happening at all? Maybe you just go to an actual different page in itself. Okay. Well, in this case, what we're going to do, we're just going to put, just for bells and whistles, let's put process.php. And the reason for that is when the actual form is submitted, and again, there's nothing on the page as of yet, but this just tells the form, hey, for all the information that I put in here, we're going to have a backend script called process.php or process.php. And then that particular file is going to have some additional programming in it. And then we're going to just let the backend server handle anything, any data that we send to the actual server itself. So let's start out with an actual search button. And we're going to need just a heading for it itself. I'm just going to use a paragraph tag. And would you like to search this site for anything before you begin? Okay, so now we can actually see something on the actual browser itself. And let's hit enter, and here goes one of the first input fields that we're going to use within the form. So here we have an input, when the type that we're going to be typing in this input field is of text. Okay, and let's also give it a name attribute. So now we're adding, so here the input field has a type attribute in which you're going to see different types, and we're going to give it a name attribute as well. And that name that we give the input field will be the name that the backend processing is actually going to use in order to manipulate the actual data itself. So let's just call this username. And I'm going to give it another attribute. That's right. Hold on to your seats. We have another attribute to being added to this element called input, and it's going to be called the same thing. And the reason why I'm adding an ID here is because when you watch the JavaScript portion, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be actually using the ID name of the elements that you're actually trying to manipulate. And so the name I have here of username, which will be used by the backend, and I can have the ID itself being used, and that's okay if they have the same name. I can give it a different name if need be, but I'm giving this an ID to actually be used with some front-end processing using JavaScript. But we're not going to use that today, but we will. This is just, again, so you can actually see it. Okay, and let's add a label to that. And I'm going to add the label right here above it. And you know what, even better, I'll place this inside the label. And the reason for that is just to actually click on that and be able to utilize the, actually click into the input field itself. So let's call this username. Okay, so now we have the username. There we go. Very good. And I'm going to just make, where's my paragraph here? I actually have it ending up there. Let me just take this. If you remember, I don't think we've talked about it as of yet, but paragraphs are a block level element, meaning that they deserve their own dedicated line. So I'm just going to keep that here just so I can keep it separated, because we're not using any styles here to separate the lines at all. I'm going to paste that and then add in an actual password, and that password input field we're going to put, usually you're going to put a password field right below. So let's see here, let's break this off, and this, we'll call this password. So here we have the password, which has been broken down over here. And let's see, let's actually get this to break down. Something seems to be missing. I got my open paragraph here, my closed paragraph, and I have a new one here. Let's see what we got here. Actually, I think I can actually include them in the same thing. Nope, that's not going to work. Control Z, and where does the word begin? Let me put a break point here, or actually an actual break itself. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So the BR is just pretty much just to break an actual line. So now we have an actual username with an input field, and we have a password with an input field. If I were to type in anything here, okay, username, let's say username is Aaron. Okay, and then for the password, what we can actually do is type in Aaron as well. But would you look at that, we don't want the password to be seen. So we're going to change the attribute for the password. We're going to change the type from text to actual password. Now, when I go, and actually we'll change the name and ID as well. But now I have this here, and then for my password, well, look at that. Now it's nothing but little dots. All right, so let's call this password, and let's go to the ID and call that password. Okay, and that covers your input field for a username and password. We'll go below this and let's work with, let's say, a user date. So let's add a label. And it's going to be for the user date. And the 4 that came up is just so we can associate this label with the next input field. So I'm just going to put user date. And Let's hit enter here. And I'm just going to type something. Let's say the day your 16s became great. Let's see if anyone in the user comments knows what that means. The day your 16s became great. All right. And below that, we're going to add an input, and it's going to be of type, not text, not password, but date. There we go. And on our screen to the right, now, let's see, the day. Okay, and actually, let's really make it into a real question. What day did your 16s become great? With a question mark. All right, and here we go, input of type date. And if we click on the actual calendar in the actual browser, you'll notice we have the actual calendar that pops up. We can choose any one here, and now it's automatically populated in there. So what day did your 16s become great? And we have the actual date, and that can then be sent over to the processing, or the process.php, which is a backend script to actually process or input the actual date, the day your 16s became great. All right, let's move on to the actual select drop-down box. So let's go below here. So we're adding a lot within this form, and the thing is, you're not going to use all of this within a form. You may use one or two things within the actual form. It's entirely up to you or the actual client or your boss as to or what's on the actual mock-up. So let's add another paragraph here, and let's say, as a hint to what day your 16s became great, please select your favorite rapper. And I'm just going to put a break line there, and I'm going to add another input, and this input is going to be of type radio. So these are the actual radio buttons, and we're going to give it a name. All right, these radio buttons are going to be linked with rappers. We're going to give it a value, and let's just say this radio button is the choice of Biggie. And we're going to take a look at the browser, and we don't see anything after it as of yet because we need to type that in. I'll just put big, B-I-G, for Biggie Smalls. All right, and to make life easier, I'm going to select the entire thing, Control-C to copy it, and Control-V a few times just to put a few more rappers there. These are all different types of radio buttons that can actually be selected. And of course, it says, please select your favorite rapper. We have 4 options of big, but we don't want that. We want to actually make a change and enter in some additional rappers. So let's go here to the value, and we'll put Jadakiss. And in order to see the actual name show up, we need to put in the appropriate text right after that input field. Okay, so now if you notice to the right, again, live server is updating that, and we can select big, and we can select Jadakiss. So we can only choose one here. And let's go down and add another one. Let's see here. Here's the choice. Now, where would you use this? Maybe it's on an mtv.com website. It really depends on what the actual client is looking for. So let's add Eminem. And we'll put his name here, Eminem. And now we have our third option, which we can select. And for the fourth and final, let's go with Prodigy. Okay, and we'll put the actual name there. So now we have 4 actual rappers itself. And let's see here. Big, Jadakiss, Eminem, and Prodigy. You select your favorite rapper. These are the actual radio buttons for your form. Let's continue on. Let's take a look and see how can we add some additional options here. Let's go with some checkboxes. We always see checkboxes on a form. Let's go below here, and we can still actually select this because most of it is pretty similar. And again, I know, again, these are not going to look pretty, not until we add the cascading style sheets of CSS. So let's say choose one thing that you like to do. Okay, and let's close this. All right, and get rid of that. And get rid of this. Okay, let me just fix up a couple of things here. We'll put this here. Instead of that, we'll have that just to break the actual line below. Perfect. And place that back. Good. And change the type here from radio to actual checkbox. So let's get rid of this, and then we'll copy what we actually need. It's not going to be a radio button. We're going to use a checkbox. So we're going to change the type attribute within the input element, and we're going to call that checkbox. And then take a look at our screen. We have a checkbox in there now. And depending on the browser that you're using, these radio buttons and checkboxes and forms will default to their own look and feel of the actual browser itself. So here, this is going to be, let's see here, services. Choose one thing that you like to do. And so this is just going to be like likes. What are the actual likes? And the value itself, let's see here. We can actually, let's see, we're looking for checkboxes here. Choose one thing that you like to do. Actually, let's use that one for something else. Let's say, please select your favorite streaming service. There we go. That seems to make a lot more sense. Then the name of this can actually be services. And the value, let's say a streaming service that I enjoy a lot is Netflix. And in order to see that after the actual checkbox, let's choose Netflix. There we go. And now we can see Netflix is right there, and we can check it by hitting the actual checkbox and deselect it by hitting it again. And now that we have something here, we can actually copy that. So select the whole thing by using the actual mouse itself, and then Control C, and then go to the end, hit enter, and do Control V a few times so we can get 3 different types of streaming services. So these are all of type checkbox. They're all services, and the values are going to change. So let's say this one is Hulu, and double click, select, copy that, paste it in. And the other one, let's say Amazon Prime. Okay, and I'll just select the whole thing, Control C or Command C for Mac, and Command V or Command C or Control V for Windows. All right, and now we have radio buttons. We have an actual form date that we can actually use and select. We have a username, we have a password, and let's see, what else do we have here that we'd like to use? Now let's move on to the actual select box. So we're going to add yet another paragraph tag. We're going to say choose one thing that you like to do. All right, and then we'll, after that, we'll choose an actual select element. And this select element, if you notice, Visual Studio again gives you some default attributes. We're going to give it a name of things to do. All right, and I don't think we can get rid of the ID here. We'll go within the actual select element, press enter, and within the actual select element, we are going to add the options element. So every option, every select box pretty much has options within it. And what we're going to have is, let's see, let's think about something that I like to do. You can name anything you want during this video. I'm just going to say I like to run. And for the text that we're going to click on, so we see the drop down arrow already to the right, but we need the actual text. So I like to run. And now that I have that, I'm going to select that by doing Control C, Control V a few times, and now I can put a few different options here. So I like to run, I like to eat, and so now if we click on that, we see the options in here. So let's fix the rest of them. I like to walk. And the fourth and final one will be I like to sleep. There we go. Now let's take a look at the drop down. I like to run, eat, walk, and sleep. Okay, so this is something where you might be at a bank site signing up. There you might have the actual forms itself, and everything that's within a form is entirely up to you, or whatever the mock-up or the design is there. You might have a number of fields here that you just give different names and IDs to. The possibilities are endless here. Let's continue to go down the line, and let's say I cannot actually select more than one of these at a time. I can only select one. So let's go on ahead and let's actually add the option. Let's see here. We'll see if we can add the option to select multiple ones here. So instead of just selecting one, we're going to select more than one option. So let's select this, Control C. I'm just using the mouse to select the entire thing, the entire element itself. And then I'm going to do Control C, press Enter a couple times, and press Control V or Command V to paste it. And I am going to say, let's select the paragraph 2, just to place that above it. And we're going to say choose, instead of one thing, 3 things or less that you watch. So please choose 3 things or less that you watch. All right, so that's fine, and we'll just name this one Things I Watch. Okay, and then for the actual options here, we're going to, so that's here. Let's see, what do I like to watch? Let's go with birds. So I'll just put, for the actual text for them to actually select, I'm going to say birds flying. Okay, so I have birds flying here, but I'm still only choosing one thing, and the reason for that is we need to add yet another attribute here, and that is going to be the size of what's actually displayed. So let's say the size is 3. So now 3 things are available to choose to the right. Okay, so now I can choose this, and let's see here. Okay, I got birds, and what else do we actually like here? Dogs. We'll go with dogs. We can add that. Dogs walking. And we'll go with cats. We'll say cats sleeping. And we'll go with fish. Let's see, so that's going to be fish swimming. And let's add one more to the bottom. We'll just call that one cows. And for the actual text that's selected, we'll go with cows mooing. That'll work. All right, so I'm selecting one. I have a size of 3, but I need to add an additional one. So I believe the additional attribute here is to put multiple on there. So now I can add, click on birds flying, hold down shift and actually control. There we go. Shift actually allows me to select them all, but I'll select birds flying, hold down the control button, and then click on cat sleeping. And now I have two of them that are actually selected. So we needed the add the multiple attribute here to the actual select element. And let's see, what else do we got going here? So that's select boxes, radio buttons, drop downs, user forms, and dates. Good, good, good. So we're actually seeing a number of different elements all used within the form. Now let's go on ahead and let's see if we can add an upload option for a file. So please upload your picture, which is sometimes used at like a Facebook or a Yahoo or a Gmail. Okay, and let's add an input, and this type for the attribute type is going to be file. So now we're actually looking to upload a file, and we'll give it a name for some back-end processing. Let's call it user image. Okay, and we're going to need another input here of type button with the value of upload, because we want to upload this image. Okay, so let's see what happens here. We click on choose file and choose the actual file itself. We'll go with my HTML thumbnail and open, and then you would have some processing for uploading that. We don't have any processing going on for the upload button, but it is there so you can actually see it. And as far as styling these things, we would make these buttons look much better once we get to the CSS portion of the series. So let's scroll down here and let's see if there's anything else we might need. Let's see, I've been to a number of sites where I needed to leave a comment. So let's go on ahead and add a comment area. So let's see, I'm going to add a label in here as well. We'll get rid of the for. And what we're going to put here is, let's say, please explain in 5 words or less why we should hire you. So if you've been to a number of different types of internet job sites, whether you've been to Indeed.com or ZipRecruiter, there's always that option for someone to actually, recruiters, they want an explanation, or the HR department, they want to see exactly how you actually type. You know, they want to read the stuff that you're actually submitting to them. Sometimes it could be the last 5 sentences that you write that can really make or break the deal, in addition to your resume. So let's add an actual text area, and let's say we can give the name for backend processing. We'll just call it comments, and that's not comments. Here's comments, and then give it an ID for some front end processing or some additional selecting via JavaScript. So we can call that also the same thing. And the columns, we have about 30 columns here. If I change that to 60, you'll notice the actual area to the right was expanded up to 30, or actually 60 columns. If I said 10 columns, it's going to get even narrow, or at least a little narrow. So for the rows, we can add 20 rows. And it actually made the box a little bit taller for us to add additional lines in here. Okay. So we'll just go with 30, and so I'll go with 30 as well. Oh, that's a little too long, so let's go with 10. All right, so we have a small little area. Please explain in 5 words or less why we should hire you. And I can just type in, because I am cool. Bam. All right, and that would then be submitted. Oh, but that's right, we can't submit this at all without an actual submit button. So we need our last input, which is of type submit. We're going to give that, we're going to give it an actual value of process form. This is what's going to show up on the button. All right, and if I put a break line here just to have that show up at the bottom. Okay, and then once I click process form, then everything here is going to be processed. If there's some JavaScript, in any type of JavaScript validation on the form, if I hit process form, then nothing here would actually go to the back end. We could, of course, stop all of that on the front end. We can use the back end with some errors or with some actual processing. Once this all goes to the process.php, you can actually say, you know what, there's an error with this, there's an error with that. Usually you want to stop all that and find any errors before you actually submit anything to the server or submit anything to the actual database. Validation, that's really going to be more of a JavaScript side, which we'll actually tackle in future series here. Let's go up to our password and let's just add an HTML5 validation. And what we can do, let's find that. Let's see here. Let's go to, how about the password? We'll go here and say it's going to be required. So first, let's see what happens when we actually process the form. All right, blah, 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 hit process. And look at that. Here, the actual local server or the live server says, you know what? Okay, process PHP, you are going to now handle this information. And then an additional screen would then come up. All right. That could be like, thank you for processing. We'll email you with the results. Okay, but now let's go to the password and say that it's actually required. So we'll go down here, type in required and equals required. And now what we can do is try to process the form and look at that. Please fill out this field. So now we need something in that field before we can continue to process this form to the actual backend server. And now that that data was supplied, now we are back to the process PHP file. Okay. There was a lot going on there, definitely a lot. You don't obviously have to remember all of the elements here, but this, at least you get to see it for the first time. You can go through here. 9 times out of 10 forms are going to be much smaller than this. But you know what? I've been at places where forms have been extremely long. So it really depends on what the needs of the client or the needs of the task is at hand. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, again, you can always leave a comment in the comment section. You can always email me directly as well. You can say, hey, I didn't understand this part, but I did understand this. Of course, subscribe. But again, I'm putting out material definitely on a weekly basis. But when I happen to have a little extra time, I'm putting more and more material out, and the material is only going to continue. So you definitely want to hit the notifications bell so you can be prompt and messaged, and then you'll say, hey, oh, all right, there's a new video out. It's covering JavaScript or CSS, or it's covering PHP or MySQL or HTML, or it's the part where they're actually building a smaller website or a small mobile application. And then you don't have to search for it. You just automatically get that notification. All right, Mr. Stack is out. Thank you very much. And again, you can always rewind the video, play it a little slower, and just get a feel for anything that you may have missed. Mr. Stack out.